Yeah, right. It won't help. You want it?
No, no, no. Actually not.
Hello, we are from Stevenson University. My name is Monica Posick.
William Thornhill, Tyler Sickman, Matthew Pillock.
And this is our Sono Imperial Foods Incorporated case. We have looked at the significant risks attached to international supplier management risk. Sorry. So Sono Imperial wants to capitalize on some cost-saving benefits by looking into some global suppliers to get inputs. The sourcing managers found a source that could offer 18% unit savings in China. And with organizations being known to lose up to 50% of those cost savings due to unexpected risks or underestimating of the costs, we've been asked to look into those risks and the expected costs to try and get a more accurate representation of the cost savings so we can get a more accurate representation of the profitability. Our first objective is to identify and discuss the most significant risks and the costs associated with procuring bottles from China. And I'm going to pass it to Tyler to talk about that.
Oh, right. So like Monica said, we're going to go over our risks first. I kind of want to just get a little overview of everything that we identified when we got the case. Our first thought was just identify all the risks, which is everything you see here, and then we kind of ranked them a little bit by how much we thought they would cost, like the amount of cost it would give us, and the amount that we thought that it would probably affect our company, our Sono Imperial, the amount that we thought it would affect. So that's kind of how we ranked them. So the four main ones we found were quality control, global government relations, supply chain risks such as weather disasters, things like that, and currency fluctuations were the four main ones. Then you see things underneath that kind of go into that categories as we go sort of rank them, as I said. A few notes that we thought, costs in China have a lot more to do than just monetary value. So it's a lot more than just the dollar sign that's there, there's relationships, things like that really go into everything that are very, very valued, almost more than the monetary value. So it's a lot of things like that we have to look into. Just kind of go deeper, dig deeper than just the dollar sign there. Another assumption we made regarding currency fluctuations, the exchange rate was a major thing that we saw. We kind of made an assumption that we would be just paying them in US dollars, that we wouldn't have to worry about the exchange, and they would kind of take that on the back end. So we kind of put that on the back burner a little bit, but we did identify it still. We just made that assumption that the dollars would be given to them US dollars and they would handle the exchange after that. So moving forward. So the first major one we found was global government relations. Now we put this first, because this is something that's actually going on right now. President Trump is actually meeting with the Chinese president this week at the Mar-a-Lago summit. Along with a lot of things, government kind of relations globally. One of the things on their list of things to talk about is going to be trade, which is exactly what we're talking about here. So this kind of is the tariffs right now, just shows a little bit of the environment that we work in here. China has a higher tariff on stuff coming into them than we do on things they send to us. And President Trump has talked about that, and in his campaign he actually talked about a 45% tariff, which is a bit ridiculous. It's a bit of much, it's a campaign technique sort of, but that just shows the attitude he sort of has going forward. He wants to raise it, he wants to change that gap. It's a whole change in environment, and that's gonna shake things up. And we have an 18% savings, and as I'll show on the next slide. We did a little breakdown of what the tariffs could be and how fast those costs are gonna eat up. And you see that quickly, even 6% change of a tariff rate is gonna go up almost $20,000. Now I will say just a note again that shipping costs be found from an outside source, so it's kind of an estimation of the shipping cost, not exactly. But it's there just kind of to show, just get a little feel of how fast those costs eat up and how fast that 18% savings can be eaten up by these tariffs. Can be eaten up by these global relations, things that kind of outside of our control. It's more just kind of the environment that we're working in. We got to really stay reactive, be able to kind of move and work with the things that are happening that our government is taking care of that we can't really control. So that's why we really thought this was a major risk, not only for the amount of cost, the amount that we can't control it, and it's happening right now, and it's probably going to affect us pretty soon. So moving forward, I'll hand this over to Will, who's our supply chain expert here, and we'll go on.
Okay, so we're going to talk about our supply chain risk of shipping from Shanghai to Baltimore. We're going to start with the natural disasters that occur So Shanghai is the 8th riskiest city for natural disasters in the world, so you have to take that into account when you're doing business over in Shanghai. The biggest concern of natural disasters there is the flooding of the Shanghai River, which occurs quite often, as we will see on the next slide. From 1984 to 2009, it has flooded 181 times. So that's something that we really needed to take into account for, is the flooding can shut down the entire city. The flooding can get as bad as it did in Ellicott City just last year, and that can happen several times a year. So from there, we also see here that several other natural disasters can occur over in Shanghai, and all of those we need to take account for. Once you total up the 746 disasters that happened from 1984 to 2009 and divide it by the 9,125 days in that time period, you get a chance, there's an 8% chance of any natural disaster happening in that time period on any given day, which is incredibly high if you really think about it. 8% chance every single day that there is a natural disaster that can occur and affect your supply chain. So moving forward off that, we decided to evaluate our supply chain based off natural disasters and the number of suppliers that we have. So our S here is, we decided to go with the floods, which is, like I said, the highest probability of occurring. So you divided the 181 by the 9,125 days and get a 2% chance of that flood happening. And then we got our unique event probability from an outside source is the 4%, and then our N is obviously the number of suppliers. So with one supplier on any given day, we have a 5.92% chance of our supply chain being disrupted. And if you had just one more supplier, just one more, it goes down to a 2.16% chance. And that's a dramatic decrease in the percentage chance of our supply chain being disrupted by a natural disaster. And if you go down to a third supplier, it goes down a little bit more to 2.1%, but we really wanted to focus on if just by adding one supplier, the percentage chance of a supply chain disruption goes down dramatically. And I also wanted to touch briefly on the insurance involved of the supply chain. Obviously, shipping from Shanghai to Baltimore is a very long trip, and you want to protect your products. So that's not necessarily a risk, but with the relationships that American and Chinese businesses have, most of the time, Chinese businesses will be, or the supplier will be the beneficiary on the insurance. Therefore, if something were to happen to our products, when it gets to America and we find damage to it, they would actually get the payout, and we would have to hope on goodwill that they would refund us for that. And then if we do become the beneficiary, we just would have to incur more costs, such as the customs entry, office time to develop those contracts, and then any other opportunity costs. Now I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who is our quality control expert.
Good morning, everybody. All right, so for the quality control risk, we have receiving defective products. Now, this is much more common than something flooding or something natural disaster happening. This happens almost every order we'll receive. And unfortunately, with our defective products, it's just going to take too much time to send them back to China and have them come back in. Like you said, the lead time for this case is 4 weeks. 4 weeks for that product to come in, we recognize the problem, send it back out, another 4 weeks, and then have it come back to us, another 4 weeks. So we're basically expecting all of our orders to be perfect. Now, as far as the legal issues go, this is going to affect our contracts with the shipping firm, contracts we have with our employees, and the Chinese company. It might lead to a strain on the relationship with the Chinese company, which I'll get to a little bit in the next slide. And unfortunately, with the defective products, we're probably going to have to front all of the money from these defective products. And that's just going to leave a bad taste in our mouth. It's going to leave a bad taste when we handle future relations with this company. Now we're going to our cost. It costs $300 to $400 per worker per day for inspection in the Chinese companies. That can really add up over time, especially if we want the entire factory scoped out. Without inspection, we're looking at potential loss in inventory over here in the States, which leads to a potential loss in sales. And we're also looking at some legal costs here. Obviously, nobody's going to want to pay for a poor product. So again, we're going to have to front all the money, and who are we going to take that out on? Are we going to take it out on the Chinese company? Are we going to take that out on the shipping company? Or are we just going to ignore everything and take the cost ourselves? And our relationship with the Chinese company, our relationship with the shipping company, even within our own company, is just all going to be affected very negatively. And now, for our second objective, Money is going to identify and discuss how the cultural differences contribute to the cost of managing an international supplier. That's all you.
Alright, hello. We are going to talk about some guanxi. Guanxi is very important in China. It's translated to relationships, and it basically is building mutual trust between the supplier and the buyer. Because especially in China, there are some legal differences culturally where sometimes it's more of a handshake basis instead of drawing up a contract, so you really have to build up that trust. You can build up guanxi by inviting or hosting dinners or giving gifts, trading information, anything to build trust like that. And if any part of the relationship chain is put into question, guanxi can lose its meaning, and then you end up losing suppliers or trust or anything like that. Now here are some cultural differences and some costs associated with them. The communication style is different in both countries. In the US, it's a little more tough and dominant, and then in China, it's slower and less aggressive. The times are specific times in the US, so if you say we're gonna meet for lunch at noon, that means you're meeting for lunch at 12. But maybe in China, if you say you're gonna meet for lunch at noon, that could be anywhere between 11 and 1. So basically with those, you're losing time, and time is money. So meals, in the US, you can discuss business in a casual setting, you can sort of get loose. And in China, it's considered rude to talk business, so meals are important to close deals, and they're more for building your guanxi. So with the costs associated with that, you can lose respect if you bring up business at a meeting that you weren't supposed to, monetary costs and major time costs. Contracts are another big thing I mentioned earlier. In the US, they're at a premium. They're sort of a normal thing. You have a business inquiry, you're going to drop a contract because you don't want to get caught in any legal issues. And in China, some things, if they're smaller, just a handshake basis, but then those can actually catch up with you. You could honestly have a complete loss of transaction if you're not careful. Entertaining and gifts. In the US, they're less valued. They're more smaller items and some like illegal if they have a high enough value. And in China, they're more relaxed on the gift giving. It's sort of a little more of the cultural thing. Sometimes there's bribing. And then major focus is on the entertaining. So the costs associated with that are values or legality and then monetary costs of gifts. And then the final business practice is greetings. In the US, they're less formal. And then in China, they always use official titles. They're very respectful. And then the costs that you could lose are maybe reputation or loss of credibility. And then objective 3, we're going to provide some specific recommendations for how Sono Imperial can improve their relations with the supplier.
So we came up with three different recommendations that we can do to kind of help this supplier relationship. A couple from our own ideas, and then a couple just from things that we've seen in the industry other companies have done. So the first one is a supplier relationship management team. And this is kind of mentioned in the case. They talk about a little bit how they have a third-party supplier, a third-party person check the supply for that first shipment. We kind of want to keep the idea rolling. We want to kind of, we like that idea, we like what they're doing, and we wanted to continue that, but just with a little change. So we've seen a lot of, these are some third-party companies who do that kind of thing, inspections like that, so those are some options. But we wanted to make our own team, maybe a mix of some guys from homegrown, from our domestic, where we're at currently in the US, and some guys from China, make them a team and have that, manage that relationship, keep it going forward, make sure things are running smoothly. The second one came up with a Voice of Supplier program. This also involves a third-party company. This is a company who would go in, meet with our supplier, talk with them, and ask them questions such as like things that we could do better, or Sono Imperial could do better, how they feel about the relationship, if they like the communication channels, things like that. And that party would talk to us. And it's just a little easier sometimes when you're dealing like directly with our supplier. They won't tell you everything that they don't like just because it's a little weird. It's a little easier sometimes to tell somebody else and have them tell them the bad news. They don't like how we talk to them, don't like how we do something. And it also just shows that we care about them, care about that relationship, want to bring in someone else who will continue to nurture that and make sure that's right, and shows the guanxi, everything, Monica mentioned, things like that. So that goes a lot with that. Our third one is to offer a supplier compliance bonus. This goes with our quality control. So what we want to do is meet with them, give them kind of a sheet of things that we were looking for with our shipments, things that we wanted to make sure we're there, make sure we're up to par. And this would just be a bonus, a monetary bonus. It's just given to them if they do comply, which would fight those costs. It's a cost up front, but hopefully fights the cost on the back end of getting defective shipments, things like that. So we give them a bonus just saying, hey, thanks for giving us what we asked for and doing it well. So those are our three techniques that we could use to kind of nurture this supplier relationship and keep moving forward and keep things smooth. To wrap this up here, I'm going to pass it back off to Matt.
What we've all been waiting for. Our final recommendation, we want to add a second supplier. We don't want to just move forward with this one Chinese company. And we would prefer if the next supplier would be domestic instead of foreign. There's just too much risk and too many extra costs. And we just don't think that it would be very good for our relationships with other companies and good for relationships within our own company if we were to add a supplier that's foreign. As you can see here, the bottom slide, the cost is only an extra $100,000. That's nothing compared to the numbers that you gave us in the case. So yeah, that's basically it. Any questions?
So I think it's a really good presentation. You all brought up a lot of pertinent facts, and you presented them very well in good fashion. In terms of looking at all of the risks associated, I think the internal risks, I think you need to talk about a little bit more, just because there can be conflicts, but I think you all, if you're shooting for the same goal, those are going to be few and far in between. And trying to understand the supplier strength, just talk that out a little bit more. It seems as if you're assuming that the supplier was going to pay for the shipping costs and the currency is going to be taken on their side. If you can negotiate that up front, that's really great, but just think out a couple of alternatives to those.
I definitely appreciated that you quantified some of those risks. I thought that was really, that was helpful for me as an audience member, understanding why you perceive it to be a risk and then you actually put numbers to it. And I thought that was really great to carry forward. I also thank you for stating your assumptions. You made some, and that's what we do in case studies, is we make some assumptions, and you presented to us where you made these assumptions so that we could have that context. I think that those were two really, really helpful pieces for me. I thought with your risk evaluations, I would love to have heard a bit more about how you would combat those risks prior to your conclusion. That was just something I was wanting more of, is how are we going to fight off some of these risks, or what are our mini conclusions prior to our final conclusion.
I love the fact that your information was exquisitely topical, talking about the current political environment, including the meeting in Mar-a-Lago today. So kudos for that. And I loved your teamwork. I love the way you guys, if you weren't presenting, you were seated so we could really focus on the presenter. Tyler, all you guys, I would be astounded if you weren't all very nervous. It showed more on some of you than others. Tyler, the legs going up and down was a little, it was a little distracting. And I just point that out to help you, and it while it distracted for me and I sort of wanted to share it with you, it doesn't diminish from how I feel about your presentation, which I thought was really excellent.
We're the only judges in the room who are related, so take this. But speaking of topical, you made a very good point about the natural disaster risk. You would have had a slam dunk if you had then segued into global warming and the fact that those risks are going to rise. You put it out there, but you didn't dunk it, and it was there for you. And it just occurs to me, everything to do with the political climate and the global climate, they're interrelated. But I thought it was great.
Thank you.
I can go next. One, I thought you're summarizing the task, right? Your first slide was great. Not everybody's going to be walking into your presentation on your business case is going to be have to read your intro materials or anything like that. Someone who's coming in close. So summarizing the task is really good. Again, the details on this